Some big transfer stories across Europe as well. Newcastle fans, you might want to hear this, you might not want to hear this about Barella to Newcastle. A man in the know is Mr. Andy Brassell, talkSPORT's European football expert, and he joins us now. Brass, really appreciate you coming on, as always. This story, some are saying it's true, some are saying it has no legs. You, I know, will know, Brassell. Newcastle fans are glued to the radio listening to this, watching us right now on YouTube. Any truth in Barella to Newcastle?
Well, all the people in the know up here in the Northeast seem to believe it's a goer. And Newcastle are ambitious. We know that. We also know that Inter need to sell big time because they have got an absolutely humongous wage bill. You look at the team, the squad that they had against City in the Champions League final. That sort of experience, that sort of quality and depth does not come cheap. It's a little bit like when Mourinho won the Champions League with them in 2010. You knew that team was going to fall apart pretty soon afterwards because it was unsustainable in terms of cost. Now, the other thing that they have, Suning, who own Inter, they've been looking for investment for a while. Now, Stephen Zhang, the president of the club, has been saying, look, I don't want to sell. There's no truth in that. But he does need money, and he needs money quickly. They've got players running out of contract, including Edin Dzeko, who they would like to re-up, but they can't really at the sort of price they're getting paid. They need to strengthen the team in a few key areas. They're going to have to replace Romelu Lukaku as well, unless they can parlay another loan from Chelsea, because they can't afford to buy him, not in a million years. They're well short on fee and wages. At least one big player needs to go this summer, because they also next year need to pay back 275 million in bank loan from somewhere. Otherwise, the club is going to get repossessed. Pretty much what happened to Milan when Elliott management took it over, because their loan was defaulted. So they don't want to be in that position. So you look at the most saleable assets. It's Barella and it's Andre Onana, who interests Chelsea and a couple of other clubs as well, because he's proved how fantastic he is this season. Ideally, they wouldn't let either of them go. But if they could sell Barella for upwards of 50 million, I think they're doing it. I think the biggest issue here is convincing him to go to Newcastle. Now, that's no slight on Newcastle United. I think you look at the players who've gone there over the last little while, and Bruno Guimaraes, who took a leap of faith because they were bottom of the table when he signed, he's been rewarded for that. And football's a small community. I think players talk. But on the other hand, you're looking at Barella, someone who's 26, who's a mainstay of the Italian national team, who's had the season of his life and would be a terrific signing for them. There's no doubt about that. He would really fit into the athleticism of that Newcastle midfield, and he's an upgrade on what they've got already. I think he'd fit brilliantly with Joelinton and Bruno Guimaraes. But he was an Inter fan since he was a kid. He's not really shown any massive desire to leave Italy either. So I think convincing him that this is the right move will be the tricky part of it.
If Barella was to end up at Newcastle, that would be such a statement from them, wouldn't it? Do you think that would be the signing that would redefine Newcastle United? Do you think that would be the one where we suddenly go, hang on a minute, this is like serious?
Yeah, I think to an extent that's right, Rory, because I think if you look at Bruno Guimaraes, of course he was respected in France, and he was a really good player for Lyon, but he was not a player who was already at top level. Barella's just played in a Champions League final. As we said, he's a main part of the Italy national team, and there are a lot of clubs in the top bracket of the Premier League that he would improve. I think if he went to Chelsea, he'd make them a better team. If he went to Liverpool, he'd make them a better team. If he went to Spurs, he'd make them a better team. So yes, if they could convince him to come, I think, as we said before, in terms of football being a small community, you're looking at this really turning heads. If you go back to Chelsea under Abramovich, when those first few dominoes start to fall, when big players start to go, that convinces other big players to go. I think it would have an enormous effect on Newcastle United and their ambitions to go further. Because at the moment, I think you look at that squad and you think, it's a good squad with a couple of outstanding players, a lot of honest ones who've improved under Eddie Howe. But unless they improve that squad significantly, they're not finishing in the top four again next season, because they've just got too many games to play.
That's a deal that could rumble on. It could happen. It might happen. One that has happened is Jude Bellingham's now secured that move to Real Madrid, and it may be it probably will be the biggest move of the summer window. What do you make of this one in terms of the new Real Madrid midfield now starting to form?
It's a great move all round, I think. Anyone who's seen Bellingham on a regular basis over the last 3 years knew that from the get-go he looked the part. You know, I think he was physically so developed for his age when he was 16, 17. And straight away he convinced his teammates, he convinced the fans. You know, they knew they weren't looking at a kid. A little bit like I've made the comparison in the past to Wayne Rooney. They're not similar as players, but in the sense of they never looked like kids when they came through at 16, 17. You know, I think it's a reasonable comparison. And, you know, in the nicest possible way, you know, you can tell he used to play a lot of Sunday football with his dad because he's got all the talent in the book, but he can handle himself as well. You can't kick him out of a game. You've never been able to kick him out of a game. And for me, it's not just his ability, it's his personality. You know, he was captain at Dortmund quite a lot last season at the age of 19. And it was just a logical step. You know, no one raised an eyebrow at it. The way he lifted his teammates, he lifted the crowd, which, as we know, at Signal Iduna Park, which holds over 80,000 and is sold out every week, is an incredibly powerful thing. Shows what a leader he can be. And that's what Real Madrid are looking for. They're not just looking for the player, they're looking for the leader. Now, if you look at the fact that he's going to fit in with Tchouaméni and Camavinga, two players who, again, unless anything drastic happens, they should be two of the best midfielders in Europe for the next decade, along with Jude Bellingham. It's pretty frightening, I think, going forward. I guess the other thing, though, is I wonder if what's happening in Saudi is a slight fly in the ointment. I was saying this on the Continent podcast earlier, the fact that ideally those three are going to be Real Madrid's three for the next 10 years. And the fact that Tchouaméni and Camavinga, their main qualities are defensive, will allow Jude Bellingham to do that breaking into the box that he does so well. A sort of posh Frank Lampard, if he fulfills all his potential, really. But the problem is, I think, is that Luka Modric, you look at him in the Croatia press conference yesterday, asked about would he consider going to Saudi, completely shut down, didn't even want to talk about it. That to me says he's at least entertaining the possibility. And who wouldn't be at 80 million quid a year? Especially when you're at that end of your career. Now, ideally, what Real Madrid want to do is a handover. So not getting those guys to play every week, but maybe getting them to play 2 out of 3. And the experience, because Bellingham's so good at taking on advice, because he's so coachable, what he would get from Modric and Kroos would make him even better than he is at the moment. Now, if Real Madrid lose a couple of those players, like they lost Karim Benzema, then that, I think, slows development down a little bit, if you see what I mean. I think in terms of having that ability to hand over with, you know, the previous best midfielders in Europe to the next best midfielders in Europe, I think that's really crucial for Real Madrid. And it's something that is not 100% in their control.
Yeah, very quickly on this one, Brass, there's been a lot of talk about this Napoli's Min Joo. Not many of us know too much about him, but he seems to be courted and sought after by a lot of big teams. How good is he? What type of player are we looking at here?
I think we're looking at someone who would be outstanding in the Premier League. He's built like a cupboard and he's really quick, which I mean are two things that you know every team is looking for. I think you look at he played for a while in China. And then I think at Fenerbahce, they were a little bit surprised about how good he was and how quickly he was good. Now, when Napoli picked him up, he had big shoes to step into in Kalidou Koulibaly, a club legend, who was not, I think, blowing the doors off the Premier League, it's fair to say, but he was brilliant in Napoli. And it was a big thing to stand in for him, someone who was a great player and adored by the club. So I think Napoli, if they sell him for the release clause, and the release clause is just valid for July, it's around 45 million euros, which is a pretty incredible value because he's just had a brilliant season. They would be quadrupling their money, Napoli, but they really don't want to lose him. But he's got such incredible offers. I mean, he could be looking at a life-changing contract.
Where, though? We've been hearing rumours of Manchester United. It probably means Harry Maguire has to move on. What club do you think he suits best to? Well,
Spurs were looking, but I mean, it's just no chance for them now because obviously they haven't made Europe. I think United is a pretty good pick. Funnily enough, in a different circumstance, I think he would replace Koulibaly pretty well at Chelsea. I mean, if United are looking to replace Harry Maguire, or the player that Harry Maguire should have been over the last couple of years, I think him with he's kind of like Maguire with a bit more confidence, a bit more pace, obviously in much better form at the moment as well. So I think he would be a massive upgrade for United.
Cheers as always, Brass. Appreciate coming on. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, guys.
Newcastle fans are going to love that. Look, certainly not ruled out by Brassell there. Looks like Barella's deal could be on again. Look, the Telegraph are the ones that are reporting that Barella could go to Newcastle. A £50 million deal for the Inter Milan midfield is what's being reported. However, as it stands right now, we're understanding a deal isn't far down the line. Brassell said it could happen, might not happen. Newcastle fans would hope, fingers crossed, everything crossed, that they can get such a good player into their squad.